I need to go. We have a budget.
Okay, that went fairly well. How are you? Nice.
Do I have 30 seconds to grab tea?
Your definition of fun is odd.
I'd like to call the Ravenna Committee of the Whole meeting to order. Hope everyone's doing well tonight. We have several items on the agenda. We're going to start off with, I guess, do we do roll call? I forget. No roll call? All right. First item on the agenda is approval of the Committee of the Whole meeting minutes of December 23rd. You all have received those minutes. Does anybody have any additions, modifications to those minutes?
No changes.
Hearing none, can we get a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Next item on the agenda is an ordinance authorizing the purchase of a 2025 Chevy 1500 in the street department. This is from Streets and Sidewalks. Mr. Harper?
Yeah, we talked about this. It's adding another vehicle to the fleet so that they can dedicate one to the labor positions that will be working mainly downtown here in the near future.
Does anybody have any questions, concerns about this item? What is the pleasure of the committee?
Ordinance.
Do we want to put this on the consent agenda?
Consent.
That's fine.
Yes.
The next item on the agenda is an ordinance increasing the water and sewer rates according to COLA and CPI recommendations. This is from Utilities. Mr. Muskin?
Yes, this is something that's been done for several years yearly, for most years. Anyway, and this is something that's very important to increase this because of expenses going up in the various departments that are paid out of water income. This time, the last time I read it was 2.9% unless the service, okay. Okay, just wanted to make sure. This is something that's very important, so it covers water meter, water billing, wastewater, water treatment.
Okay, although this is on one item for our agenda tonight, we actually have two ordinances. One is for the water rate and one is for the sewer rate. We had a discussion during the committee meetings that this is something that's mandated in our code, that we use the consumer price index and the to establish the cost of living increase. So the question became, well, do we need an ordinance? And we do, because in our codified ordinances, it actually lists the current rate. Now, ironically, it's not listing last year's rate for some reason. I don't know if they didn't update our codified ordinances correctly. But since that has to be published back into the codified ordinances, we do need an ordinance to do this. And then when we're thinking about it, let's face it, I mean, this is something that affects all of our residents, right? This is a water and sewer increase. I think it's incumbent upon us to consider it and talk about it and vote on it.
Well, I know the rate isn't the same every year, so it could vary.
Well, yeah, it's based upon the,
Yes.
the indexes that determine the cost of living. Okay, so although there's only one item, we're going to have two ordinances. So what is the pleasure of committee?
Ordinance.
I'm going to suggest that we not put this in the consent agenda just because it has such a big impact. And can I assume your vote for ordinance goes for both?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
That's a necessity.
Mr. Karras, during last month's meeting, when we were talking about these water rates, some of us were looking at the ordinance where it's listed about the cost of living adjustment. And I was surprised to see that under that ordinance, there's a section where it says senior citizens in Ravenna get 10% off their water bill. I've lived in Ravenna for over 20 years, and somehow I didn't know that. And I could have applied for it 12 years ago. And as soon as the meeting was over, I contacted the water department, and yes, I'm eligible. So I am encouraging all of the senior citizens in Ravenna, as they think about their water bill, that they make sure that they're taking advantage of the 10% off on the water bill. I did not know it, and I'm sure there's other people that aren't. I hate to bring that up at the time we're talking about raising rates,
Hey, it
but
offset it maybe.
it's an important thing. 10%. I asked for a retroactive payment, a rebate back. That was impossible. They said, no way.
And that's been in effect for a long time.
Dr. Kelly, thank you for that very important public,
Service announcement.
exactly, thank you. Okay, moving on. The next ordinance is an ordinance creating a consultant selection committee and description of member duties. This is from Utilities, Mr. Moskin.
Yes, I want some more clarification from the service director on this, more than what I have.
I think this is actually from our engineer.
Okay.
So, and this is in preparation for that lift station on Chestnut and the project related to that. So maybe, Bob, if you can go ahead and give us a little background and what, we used to have the committee, that we disbanded it, repealed the ordinance, and now we're looking to revitalize it.
And welcome back, Bob, by the way.
Yes, welcome back.
Thanks. So somewhere around 1978, there was a resolution passed establishing a consultant selection committee, and it gave the rules and guidelines. And then in 2016, I think, I requested it to be repealed because it was outdated, and City Council did repeal that, with the understanding we would use ORC 153.69, I think it is. And then there's other sections of the ORC that also helps explain the whole process. When Rob and I discussed this, ORC doesn't put a committee together, so to speak. So the City of Ravenna should have a committee stating who is going to be on the consultant selection committee. ORC describes how you go about soliciting requests for qualifications, and they mention how best to choose with a scoring system and a committee and that sort of thing. So in the past, there was 2 council members, Board of Control, which would be mayor, service director, finance director, 2 council members, and then the city engineer. But I would move further and state whose ever project it is. For instance, water plant, wastewater plant, that department head would be part of this committee. If, for instance, Judy was going to solicit RFQs for something, I wouldn't necessarily need to be on that committee, be that department head. And again, it spells out who's involved, and we could go as far as to say what the vote has to be, if it's a unanimous vote, or how many members have to be present to vote to choose that consultant selection, or the consultant.
Yeah, I think the main thing is to figure out who's on the committee, and then just basically reference some fundamental ideas like what constitutes a positive outcome, but then just refer to the ORC for directions on how to do it, because you're going to have to be in compliance with that anyway.
Right.
So it'll be a fairly simple ordinance to put together. So if you can send the list of people to the clerk, and then they can prepare the ordinance, then we can get this done pretty quickly, I think.
All right.
Does anybody have any questions or concerns about this? What's the pleasure of the committee?
Ordinance.
We want to put this on the consent agenda.
No, I think, would this be one we would need to talk about more in depth, or no?
I don't think so, unless there's concerns with what positions are listed. It's pretty self-explanatory.
Okay, I mean,
We could slate it for it and then
It
pull
only
it out
takes us-
later, so.
It only takes a single voice to take it out of the consent agenda. We could put it in for now, and then if anybody, when we have a regular meeting, wants to take it out, we can.
I'm amenable to that.
Okay, so we'll put it in the consent agenda for now. The next item is an ordinance approving the Design Review Commission guidelines from prospectus. This is from the Planning Committee, Ms. West?
Do we have members from the Design Review Committee that are asking to speak today?
Yeah,
You have residents too.
First of all, I don't want to open this up to like some long debate. There is a plan in place. We're going to have a public hearing on February 18th, correct? That's a Tuesday because I believe the 17th is President's Day. It's a holiday.
President's Day.
I believe let me make sure I have my dates correct.
You are correct, Rob.
So
Yeah,
did-
so the 18th is the night we normally have our committee of the whole meeting, so it's a month from now. But before we have the committee of the whole, we'll have a public hearing to discuss the design review guidelines. And then on Monday, the 24th, which is an off Monday for us, we're going to have a special meeting to vote on the guidelines because we found out the deadline to obtain the grant is the 28th of February. Okay, so everything lines up fine.
Did notices already go out? For the
We don't, this does not require notices to go out like we did for the zoning change. And I mean, and I don't know, it would be pretty onerous task to let everybody within the historic district know.
Well, how will they know?
Well, we're going to advertise it in the paper, like we do any public hearing.
Is it going to be on our internet as well?
We can put it on the
I would
internet.
put it on our internet and our city's Facebook page as well. Any bit of information that we have to use to get the information out, I think is pertinent.
Do we have a water bill before now and then that could slide into as well for notices? Or
We would have a water bill.
Yes.
Would that be okay, Mr. Content?
not sure if
It
anyone's.
depends on when we send it out. I mean, when is this, next month?
Yes.
Yeah, February 18th, Tuesday, February 18th.
I'll ask Mike Reynolds about it and see if he can do
Okay.
that.
Okay. Appreciate that.
Yeah, no, I'm all for as much publicity about it as possible. But I wanted to make sure everyone knew the plan. So it's not like we're rushing to get this done by the February regular meeting. So I did ask Mr. Manfres to talk because the Design Review Commission did approve the guidelines, but there were some subtle changes. So I'm going to ask him to present those to council. And then if anybody wants to speak, but again, we're going to have a public hearing about this, so we're not going to spend a whole lot of time tonight. Mr. Manfres.
Thank you. To give you some brief history, Council passed 1434, 1986, establishing the groundwork for the Design Review Commission. So the Design Review Commission has been around for 38 years. I don't know how many of you remember Ernestine Kyle. Ernestine and I put the first guidelines together, literally cutting and pasting from the National Historical Guidelines and other things to create the document that we worked from. It was updated very minorly in 2014 and again in 2017. But 1434 is the vehicle that established the Design Review Commission and the Design Review District. So they've been there for 38 years. I am the one that pushed primarily, I've been on the Design Review Commission almost entirely for 38 years, other than when Paul Jones kicked everybody off for a while and then we all got back on. But we've attempted to keep the historic character of Ravenna, housing, buildings, as much intact as we can. But I pushed to have an outside firm go through the guidelines and basically bring them up to 1920 or 2024. After 38 years, it was time to upgrade them. And we selected Prospectus. Prospectus went through, asked us questions, we gave them answers. And they generated the document that you have. The size of the document went from 24 pages to 142 pages or whatever. Much of that is due to SHPO, the State Historical Preservation Office. The last 80 pages of this, or 60-some pages, is basically reference material for someone who wants to do something within the district. It gives you pictures and describes how work can be done, and then it gives you recommendations. So replacing a window, a door, a porch, a gable, they're all in there piece by piece and very well done. So when you hand this document to someone who wants to do something within the district, rather than 24 pages of nothing but verbiage, it now has an illustrated manual that will assist them quite well in determining what they need to do and how to go about it before they come to the Design Review Commission. We've been working with the neighbors. Unfortunately, the guidelines run from Sycamore to Linden. And while the residential owners, as Cynthia had mentioned, left to themselves will do the right thing more often than not, most of the commercial owners from Sycamore to Freedom will not. And that's really the test of the guidelines is to make sure that the commercial section, the downtown of Ravenna, stays as true to the character and the architectural history of Ravenna as we can. We have one item that Larry and I are kind of working on. We're trying to come up with a process where we can issue an expedited approval for paint colors. If someone wishes to paint a house, they don't have to wait for the next meeting. Could be as little as 10 days, could be as much as 30 days, depending upon when they apply. But come up with a means of giving an expedited approval if they select a color off the historic palette. Sherwin-Williams has one. Almost every paint color has a palette of historic colors. If they stay on the historic palette, then they're approved. There's no questions asked. You're using an appropriate color off a historic palette. So we're trying to get the verbiage and come up with a way that very quickly, within several days, we can get a color change for a house or a building approved without having to wait for a full meeting. We meet again tomorrow. Basically, we're done with the guidelines. We're meeting tomorrow to talk about 1434 and to talk about signage. But I'm going to reopen the meeting and see if we can work out the expedited approval as an item that we can get into the guidelines so that we can make that available to people who would like to use it.
So, assuming you get the commission to approve these changes to what Perspective has presented with regard to paint in this expedited process, will Perspectives put this back in, or how would the guidelines be updated?
Well, all the items, we made a series of motions last Wednesday. Those showed up this afternoon. They are now in the book.
Oh, okay.
So the book, we got one copy at 2:30, and it was missing the change on the page. We got it back with the change on the page, and then we got it back later with several of the photographs taken out that were requested to be taken out thereof. So as of 4 o'clock this afternoon, Julie has the design guidelines that are to the minute. If we make a change tomorrow to get the expedited approval process in, that will go back to them, and hopefully within a day or whatever, that will come back, and then we're done. So last Wednesday, we made motions, and then the final motion was to include the guidelines with the previously passed motions and forward it to you. So when we forwarded it to you, it was as complete as we could be. Now, Prospectus has updated all the pages. Everything that we put in last week is now current.
So my question is pertaining to Prospectus. They had a deadline last year, so why did it go much longer than the deadline? And to my understanding, there wasn't a request.
I can't speak for them. I can tell you that there were times they requested information from us and we weren't timely in responding. We didn't get it done at a meeting, and so it went a month to the next meeting. So we as a commission are responsible to some point, because they had asked us for information and we didn't get them information timely.
So, I mean, that, to me, that raises a business flag right there. I see someone back there shaking his head in dispute, so.
The people on Prospectus for years and years were Chambers and Chambers from Medina, Hank Chambers and his wife. And they were historic preservationists their whole career, their whole lives. They were both architects and did historic preservation. And over the years, they added staff, Lauren Burge and a number, predominantly women. Hank passed away, and then later his wife passed away, but the firm Chambers and Chambers continued doing nothing but historic preservation architecture. They, several years ago, were acquired by Prospectus. So the group at Prospectus that did this, that does the historic preservation, has been doing that forever. And they were one of the few, but they were the top historic preservation firm in Northeast Ohio.
I just had a question, and I don't know if now's the time to ask the question or not. There were some concerns over the amount of times the word shall was used. Could that be an issue down the road, as far as if somebody comes before a design review and the word is shall in there? Would that be an issue of how something is perceived? I mean, is it anything that would need to be changed to more, either a yes or a no instead of shall?
Like shall versus should for
Yes.
concepts?
Yeah, shall, right, sorry. Do you see that being a concern, or,
Well,
because I know,
the design guidelines for the first 38 years said should. And Prospectus came back to us and said, if you look at 1434, which is the document that Council created, that document is very specific. And there's 9 bullet points in it, and in those 9 bullet points, Council used the word shall 14 times. So there.
that would be our law director that used that probably when they wrote it.
Prospectus said, your codified ordinance says shall. For you to say should is not really keeping shall.
Yeah, I think shall sounds better than should, because should could be, I think, more like, well, you
Suggested
should.
or
Yeah,
required,
suggest, yes, exactly.
Should.
Yeah, I understand that now.
Should becomes more like a recommendation. We think you should do it, and then they don't do it, and you have no recourse because If you say shall has, we're a commission, and a commission typically has power. A board does not. The board recommends a commission has power. We are a commission. In 38 years, I don't think we've abused that power. And I agree with Cliff. Many of us on that commission are getting older. And at some point will be replaced. But there's a number of things that we've not wanted to get into. 1434 talks about landscaping and trees and site and whatever. The only time that I can remember we ever talked about landscaping was in downtown. We don't want to get into landscaping at a house. We don't want trees at a house. We don't want to tell somebody they can't cut down a shrub. It's your landscaping, do with it what you want. But if someone's planting trees and doing landscaping within the downtown, that we'd like to have some control of. I don't know. I think this commission has done its job for 38 years. There isn't any more restrictions in these guidelines than were in the old ones, other than the change from should to shall. And again, council set that when they made 1434 and put shall in it. If you read that, it says existing woodwork, whatever, shall be maintained. If it can't be maintained, it shall be reproduced. It's strong language in 1434.
What is your thought on that? Your individual thought?
I'm an architect. I think that things, when there's damage and you rebuild something, you should rebuild it the way it was. If it's of historic significance, there's a lot of things on some of the buildings and probably on some of the houses that would not have to be put back exactly the way it was if it was damaged or if it was rotted. But again, if you take the time to go through this, for instance, it talks about porches. And one of the recommendations is if your porch has what we call Philadelphia fencing, which is the tongue and groove wood on the ceiling, it pretty much says, please leave it. That's an important item in a porch. Don't take it out. It doesn't say you can't. But again, it's a recommendation that talks about items, that talks about different things and how important they are to the overall design and aesthetics of the building, so.
Okay, so we'll also, I didn't mention, have time to talk about this again in the planning committee meeting in February as well. So we'll have time to sort out, and I don't think any of us has had time to read whatever the changes were made lately. Are there any questions about the process or about what Mr. Manford says is described in general about the guidelines? Because again, I don't want to turn tonight into a big debate about this. We'll have plenty of time to talk about it going forward.
I do think if they since there are some residents, I know the gentleman who, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but there was a part in it about stucco, and his house is stucco, and it is a design, that's how it is, and it's in the historic part. So I think that there are some legitimate concerns that if there are going to be changes made, or since you guys do have a meeting tomorrow, I think it's important if you at least give them a couple minutes to, since they made effort to show up tonight.
No, I'm not saying I'm going to deny anybody the ability to.
No, I understand, but I just think there are some valid points that since, Ted is here from the, design review, and I think, any information that maybe you could take back to the meeting tomorrow, and the residents who are living in these homes, in these beautiful homes, I think it's important that you hear just a few of their concerns. It doesn't mean, like, I know we're going to have a public hearing, but if we can prevent some things or maybe have a better understanding for communication purposes, I think it's important to do that.
Yeah, no, I was really making my comments to the council about, we'll have plenty of time to discuss this. I do see that we have some residents. So if anybody wants to just weigh in briefly, Mr. Manfres, are you done?
Well, I just wanted to
Okay.
address Amy's comment, that we will, after the public hearing, I think we will probably schedule a meeting the next day. And if there are items that come out of the public hearing or come out of our meetings with you when we meet several times in February prior to the public meeting, we want to make sure that we have those, and if there are good valid items and whatever, we want to try and get them in the guidelines before you on the 24th approve it, so that we can get those items in.
Right. Yeah, good. And I think any communication sooner than later is better. So that's why I'm glad that, you know, they made a due diligence to show up tonight to find out, so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ted.
Mr. Selenius, you'd like to make a comment?
Larry Selenius, 123 North Walnut. First of all, I just want to say Ted deserves a lot of credit. He initiated the contacts that led to the changes we've made so far. On the subject of should or shall, most of us believe since these are the guidelines and not the laws, you should be using the word should. When you asked Mr. Manfres what he thought personally, he used the word should.
Yes.
He repeatedly used the word recommendation. A recommendation is a should, not a shall. So I think council needs to take a look at that issue. Other than that, I think we will be able to reach agreement on everything else tomorrow. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Selenius. I know you've worked hard on this as well.
Yes, thank you, Larry.
Other,
And Cliff.
yeah, if you could just state your name and address.
My name is Paul Scheckman. I live at 733 East Main Street. 2 points. Number one is, the gentleman here is separating business district and historical, things that they want for the business district don't pertain to the residential. Is there any way to split it when you have the guidelines that this is for the residential? I'm talking about the trees and the shrubs and all that. Can we differentiate between the two? Okay, that's number one. The second thing is, everything in there requires a COA. Okay? If I have a patch that I have to put on the outside of my house, okay, simple patch. I have big columns in my house and they're wearing, and there's something very simply I can do myself. Does it require an approval to get it done? Because according to the guidelines, it does. Any type of repair to the outside of your house requires an approval. But it's something I can do, and it's an hour worth of work. Okay. That's the only two things that I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good points.
Does anybody else wish to make a comment? Yes, sir. Please come up and give us your name and address.
My name is Peter Martin. I live at, excuse me, 715 East Main Street. What I'd like to impress upon council, and is the same item that I brought up in front of the Design Review Commission when I attended their meeting recently as well, is that this document that you're getting prepared to approve and put in place is going to survive all of us. And there are many vague items throughout this entire document that I appreciate Mr. Manfres saying that we...
Hold on 1 second. We got a background. It's okay. It's okay. Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
I appreciate Mr. Manfred saying that we've never done that, or we would never prevent someone from doing this. However, if the document says that they have the ability to, that doesn't mean that sometime in the future, when all of us are gone, that someone might come and say, oh my gosh, that guy at 715 East Main Street planted a rose bush, he needs to pull that out. Or he took that tree down, we're gonna fine him. Even though the tree might have hosted a colony of carpenter ants, which happened to me this spring. I discovered it, the tree was gone less than a week later, because it's important that it happens fast when you find something like that. So I just urge you to look at this thing and think, when all these people are gone that don't have this history of, we've never done that, or we wouldn't enforce that, if it's in there, it could be enforced at some point in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Anybody else wish to speak to this item?
Yeah, I don't necessarily want to continue the conversation because, as you said, we will have a public meeting. But if you look carefully at the updated guidelines, the original guideline that came back from Prospectus included a section where you would need a certificate of approval over vegetation and landscaping. And that has been removed out of the document now. So I just wanted to say that concern. Also, the idea of cleaning a building is not something that would be covered by needing a COA. So just thought I'd throw that out there, but I'm sure all of it will come up at the public meeting.
Yeah, and we'll get those updates delivered to us, and we can look them over ourselves. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Sodal, you'd like to make a comment?
Clifford Sodal, 464 Woodman Street. I just want to have you clarify if this is moved forward tonight, that's what you're here for, right?
Well,
What are you putting forward here?
We're going to have the public hearing before, right? The committee of the whole. So the next committee of the whole will be when we can actually move it forward. There'll be another planning committee meeting. We'll have the public hearing. The same night following the public hearing, this committee of the whole committee will vote to move it forward for the special meeting on February 24th. So we don't have to take action on this tonight.
So it's just a discussion item for this evening?
Yeah, we're going to have a second crack at this. So there's no reason to make a vote to put this on any agenda tonight.
Only thing I was asking. Thank you.
Thanks. It's helpful to have that clarification. Okay, if there's no other comments, we'll move on to the next item in the agenda. Next item is an ordinance amending section 1268.07 of the codified ordinance. This is from the planning committee, Ms. West?
7, 8, 9, is this correct? Because it says 6, 7, and 8 on these.
It's the code.
1268.07. Okay, I got you. So this is an ordinance making a conditional use for the massage, the health spas, so adjusting that language. That as well as, well, the next two. But this is to change that to conditional.
Right, and if you recall, we had this discussion at our last regular meeting, and the law director said it would be a good idea to bundle these together. These are the commercial districts in our city where we will make massage establishments, health spas, and fitness centers conditionally approved by the Planning Commission. Right?
And then this will all be ready, good to go, correct? With
Yeah, so this will be on the February meeting. We'll have, oh, wait a second.
No,
We have to have a public hearing.
Right.
Yes.
We have a public hearing on this one. It is scheduled already.
And the public hearing is on
February
24th. So the night we're having the special meeting to talk about the design
But we're
review
doing it.
guidelines, or no, the special meeting to approve them, we will also have a public meeting before or after? Okay, before. So, and that's because when we did a little research, there are, when it's a zoning change, like we did for the super good land that we rezoned, we have to follow certain procedures. And one is there has to be a public hearing, and it has to be 30 days. This isn't rezoning, but it falls under the same Ohio Revised Code standards for a public hearing. So there's no residents to notify, because this isn't a
No.
fixed piece of land.
But as far as all of the qualifications and stuff that what we were requiring that they have now, this is still encompassed in this, correct?
Well,
This
that's
is where it
a
got all
separate
confused.
ordinance that we've already talked about.
Right.
And we're going to vote on that. Well, we'll decide how you want to do that.
Because
now
I
think
was under
about
the
it.
impression that part of it was already going to be done, and this part was separate.
It is, it's just we have a delay because of the public hearing provision. So we'll talk about this at our next regular meeting. Well,
I mean, I don't want to keep
it's already on the
prolonging.
agenda, what we've already talked about, which is the chapter on creating the massage establishments, which we finally
Right.
came to agreement about how it should be written. We still haven't voted on it because we were going to put these together. The question is, does council want to vote on those at the regular meeting in February? If we do, we'll have that approved, but we won't have these conditional permitted ordinances in place by then.
Could we put them all on the same
We
special?
could, that's why,
So that way it's all flows together and is all the same?
I mean, I mean, it doesn't really matter, I guess. I just keep hating to hold off getting that one ordinance passed. It's driving me crazy. But I mean,
unfortunately, our hands are tied because we do have to provide a 30-day notice before the public hearing in this.
for that one, but not the other.
No, not the other.
Right.
Because it's not part of a zoning change.
But if we're going to make a change to this, it should reflect the same change.
Well, here's an idea. We could pass the
With
one we have
right.
on the agenda without the emergency clause. So it won't take effect until 30 days and later. We can pass these with an emergency clause, and they'll pretty much coincide as far as when they take effect.
So we'll be voting on the what Amy had worked on in February, and then this will be voted at the end of
Actually, March, probably.
March.
Yeah, I just, like I said,
Making sense?
I don't want to make it difficult, but at the same time, it's like, what we're requesting these establishments to have. I want to make sure somebody's not going to come along and, you know, we've worked so hard to get this established that I'd like to at least get that part of it on the books.
We could do
The
that.
difference that we're talking about is the meeting in February is on the 3rd, and you're talking about having the other meeting on the 24th. It's like 3 weeks difference, so there's a 3-week delay. So, and I think all of the things that are delaying it have been removed, and it's ready to go. So it would just, I know it's been a while that we're concerned about it, but it's 3 weeks from this 3rd to the 23rd.
I don't think it's a huge deal, but council can decide in the February meeting whether or not it wants to pass that ordinance at that time, or, like I said, pass it without the emergency clause, or wait until March and pass them all together. We don't have to decide that tonight. And just like the prior item, we don't necessarily have to vote to push this on because it's going to be on the next committee of the whole meeting agenda as well, the same night as the public hearing. Does that make sense?
Yes.
If at some point we want to get a whiteboard to do a flow chart,
I'm telling you, it's too,
We have to. Damn Ohio Revised Code. Okay.
So these three are making changes to the commercial district, heavy commercial district, and central business district, are the three districts that's broken into.
Correct. Okay, we good to go on?
I just covered a lot.
All right, the next item on the agenda is an ordinance amending the composition of the Ravenna Parks Board. This is also from the Planning Committee.
Historically, two people from the school board sat on the Parks Board. Typically, only one shows. Making this change allows us to put another member that wants to participate and be active in the committee. So it's changing it from saying the school board has 2 people to 1, and then we're able to add that additional person that has not been participating.
Yeah, I think this is all itemized in the document from the Parks.
Just
and Rec
opens up a
Director.
seat for not just a school board member, it opens up a seat for a resident to participate in.
Any questions, concerns about this? What's the pleasure of the committee?
Ordinance,
Ordinance, and then
Would you like to have this on the
consent agenda.
Yes, please.
Moving on, the next item is an ordinance to enter into a contract with Lightspeed for fiber services. This is from Information Systems, Mr. Maravich.
Yes, so we have an opportunity to enlist with a new service provider for internet for the city, which is Better Speed, and we get to lock in a price for 5 years, but what I would consider a very affordable rate for all the different buildings we're connected.
Have we ironed out the difficulties we ran into? Mm-mm. So we ran into a little development where our IT director, Mr. Bender, was contacted by Spectrum and informed that our contract with Spectrum doesn't actually end until 2027. And we're trying, did you follow up with?
Yeah. John, I just talked to Jonathan today. He is still working on ironing out all the details, so I would suggest we put this off until we can get a little more information from him.
Well, I think the ironic thing is we can't find a contract that has that deadline, so
Ask them to supply a copy.
that's
Yeah,
what,
he's
that's what the
in
process of
contact
trying to
with
do.
Spectrum, and he's going back and forth, but it is a little bit hard getting the company to respond quickly, or as quickly as he'd like them to, so, yeah.
I wonder
You know,
why.
wouldn't that be in a council ordinance? Because I remember, it's been a while ago when Kathy was here, I remember when we were going into ordinance on with Spectrum. That's how long ago it was.
As far as I could tell, this should be the 5 years, so that's why we're trying, Jonathan's trying to figure this out, because it did not make sense what he had heard from Spectrum literally the day after he was here presenting this whole thing to council, so he's really working hard to try and iron out the details
Okay.
for us.
I'm sure
Well,
their account manager is working very hard too.
My concern about not moving this forward, though, is time, if Spectrum is wrong, we need to get this going with Lightspeed as soon as we
Yeah,
can.
true. If
I know we
not-
will have, supposedly, I think we would have a month-to-month with Spectrum, but still, I would advise council that maybe we should continue to move this forward. We can always pull
True.
it at the last minute.
True, because we don't meet again for 2 more weeks, so maybe Jonathan will have it ironed out.
Yeah, we may have this by the February meeting.
I think we should move it forward in hopes that
Yeah.
Spectrum's wrong.
Yeah, I think they're wrong.
Okay, so.
A clerical error from Spectrum? I would be shocked.
Okay. So, just for formality's sake, what's the pleasure of the committee?
Ordinance.
Let's not put this on the consent agenda just because it's got some big, whatever. Okay. Next item on the agenda is a resolution of support for the National Infrastructure Bank. This is from Community and Economic Development. Ms. Wood?
It's exactly as it states. It's just a resolution in support of the National Infrastructure Bank Act.
Right, and this, so, you know, this would be a national initiative, so a House bill, for example, down in Washington, and it would provide, I believe, $5 trillion in infrastructure loans and potentially some grants as well. So we just talked about, you know, broadband. This, you know, expanding broadband would be covered by this, assuming if it ever got passed. So in conjunction with considering passage of this resolution, what we would hope to do is forward this on to David Joyce, our representative in the House of Representatives, and ask him to consider the bill and perhaps even sponsor it. Any other comments or questions? What's the pleasure of the committee?
Ordinance.
Resolution.
Oh,
Pop
sorry.
quiz.
So used to saying that.
And I'd like to keep this in the regular agenda. Okay, next item is an ordinance accepting responsibility an authority over the entire CHIP program. Again, this is Community and Economic Development, Ms. Wood?
Yes, and this is basically housekeeping as we are already the administrative entity over the CHIP that includes the city of Streetsboro and Portage County. So we already take on all the responsibilities attached to that program. It's the state requiring the specific verbiage in the ordinance, except as the city accepting that responsibility.
Okay. Questions or concerns about this? What's the pleasure of the committee?
Ordinance,
Would you like to add this to the consent agenda?
yes.
Consent.
Okay. And then the last item on the agenda is an ordinance authorizing the execution of then and now certificates. This comes from our finance director, Ms. Lawrence.
Yes, this is the monthly authorization for the finance PO obligations. It's a state audit requirement that we are doing now. And there's a short list attached that needs authorization.
I have a question about that. It is our goal to reduce these, and this month it's over $70,000 in then and now certificates, including several that are annual payments that would be on the book. It's okay to do it. I just wonder if at a level of $70,000, if an auditor may say that rises to a material finding, that many.
That's exactly why we're doing this.
Okay.
Because that would prevent that from happening.
Okay.
Exactly what you're saying. And 4 of these are annual, and I'm working with departments, because what happens is some of these annual memberships, things like that, sneak up on departments. They don't remember, they don't put them on their PO list that they do annually, and that's why they end up on this list.
So it's going to take a little time to get everybody on board, but I assume as these come
Condition.
through, if they're regular things, they'll get taken off pretty quickly.
Each department has a list at the beginning of the year of POs that they know they need to do. Some of these things could be new things, other things are just ones that they overlook. Or maybe somebody would change the timing of giving us that annual invoice as well.
Okay, what's the pleasure of the committee?
Ordinance.
Consent.
Consent agenda? Okay, we are finished. Is there any other business we need to consider tonight? Hearing none, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Everybody in favor?
Yes.
We are adjourned.